Hello, hello, hello across the plane. What is up, everybody? Hope y'all are doing great. I'm going to go ahead and pop into this live stream from the YouTube end and make sure that I'm not talking. What is up, everybody? Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm not talking to thin air or make sure that you guys could hear me. So, looks like you can. Got a few people in the chat already. Hello, James, Spherical Cow, Rod Knocker, Tinfoil Hatter. Hello, hello. Globe Busters, hey, Bob. Great, good. I'm glad y'all can hear me. Just doing sort of an impromptu live stream this evening. There was a few things that I've sort of been kicking around wanting to do, and I might just have a little bit of fun with it tonight, see how you guys like it. But and maybe I'll wait just a few minutes to see if we get some more people pop in before I start getting into the meat of the thing. But it's been a kind of a long day today. I was really blessed at the end of the day, or towards sunset. There was just a really, really beautiful, not quite full moon, but full a darn enough moon, way off in the east as the sun was setting off in the west. And just another one of those reminders, big bright blue sky and a nearly full moon. Don't work on the glue. So it's just nice to see those little confirmations. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside, because it just seems like the flat Earth topic hasn't just gained momentum in the sense of more people are involved and better proofs are around, but it just seems like people are getting it quicker or more easily, which I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't know. It seems like maybe a couple of years ago, at least in my own personal experience, it was very, very difficult to get people on board with at least looking at this thing objectively, without the whole sideways glances and, oh, this guy must be freaking crazy, thinks the Earth's flat. Of course, we still get that, but it just seems like people are able to pick up on this a lot more readily than they used to not that long ago. And, I'm sure that some of that has to do with us having better arguments, just a huge, huge volume of arguments, better honed arguments, and, well, pretty much knowing exactly what the counter arguments are going to be from the Globe Earth team, because frankly, that really hasn't changed much in, a couple thousand years or a couple hundred years as far as we can tell. Um, and of course, the beautiful thing about flat Earth is that any sort of argument that comes out against it, there's always, never fails, a logical explanation, and the observation actually works better on a flat Earth. And I'll go from some sort of one extreme example to another, and I love to use this one because it really, really is telling. But globe earthers will tell you things like, what goes up must come down. Therefore, we live stuck to the side of a spinning sphere in outer space, right? Which is just absurd. If you think about the claim involved there, right? Because when you first start telling people about flat Earth, they're like, well, what about gravity? Why do things fall to the Earth, right? So that stance implies exactly what I just said. What goes up must come down. Therefore, we live stuck to the side of a spinning ball, right? And it's just so absurd because, if you study rotating bodies as a fixed frame of reference just even a little bit, you'll know about this little fictitious force called centrifugal force, or an outward thrust for weighty objects attached to a spinning object. It's basically inertia and conservation of momentum. And um, but you've just got this obvious thing where if you are to, say, throw a weighty object out and away from the center of a rotating body as a fixed frame of reference, so say like a merry-go-round or the gravitron at the fair or whatever, anything that spins around really fast, if you put yourself on the edge of that spinning object, say that represents standing at the equator, and then throwing an object out and away, up and away from the axis of rotation, the last thing you would ever expect would be for that object to come back down towards the center of rotation, right? Because well, one thing that's not going to happen is that object's not going to continue spinning around the axis at all once it's released from the rotational body. It's the object is going to want to travel 90 degrees to the axis, and depending on how much force you exert throwing it up and away from the axis, it'll have some angle out and away, 90 degrees plus or minus, whatever your force is expelling it out. But it's certainly the last thing that you would ever in a million years expect would be to see that object come back towards the center of rotation. That's just not how physics works at all. And yet we've been so well manipulated. And I say we because, I'm guilty of it too for most of my life, except for the last few years. But we've been so well conditioned. I mean, beautifully conditioned. You got to hand it to these guys. Whoever writes this curriculum and is responsible at some level for continuing and perpetuating the globe lie, they're freaking genius, because they have done such a good job of dulling us down, making us refuse to accept our senses, making us refuse to apply basic elementary physical laws to the hypothetical spinning ball Earth. That, again, and the prime example is what goes up must come down. Therefore, we live stuck to the side of a spinning sphere in the vacuum of space. And, again, you'll get people that say, well, if the Earth isn't a spinning ball, then why do apples fall from trees? Haha, gotcha. Because apples would never fall from trees without gravity. And, of course, gravity is just nothing more than a theory to explain that phenomenon of what goes up must come down, assuming that the Earth is a spinning sphere in the first place. So gravity is a theory to explain that natural, repeatable phenomenon. Yet science has become such a dogmatic religion that people believe apples falling from trees somehow proves the theory of gravity. And furthermore, apples from falling from trees are exclusive to a hypothetical spinning ball Earth, right? And so that's just one example of how incredibly well whomever they are, what a hell of a job these guys have done manipulating the way that people view the world, and by extension, ourselves. It's very scary, but it is, it's interesting, looking at this thing for a few years. You got to admit one thing, that it's interesting of how just massively deceived people can be. And not only how massively deceived can they be, but how much they just really love that deception and defend that deception, and viciously defend themselves from the truth, and shooting the messenger and all. But back to my original point, though, it just seems like it's gotten a little bit easier for people to just look at this damn topic a little bit. And any flat earther will tell you, once you look at this topic a little bit objectively, it's just amazing. There's something to this, right? Now, does that suddenly mean that we're crazy because we look at this cockamamie, just wild conspiracy theory, right? And we're like, well, wait a minute, this actually makes a lot of sense. Hold on here a minute. So that makes you crazy, though, in the public eye, or at least it used to. And so, maybe this comes back to the 100th monkey experiment. And there was two of these. One of them didn't happen, and as far as I know, one of them did. These whole 100th monkey phenomenon effect. One of them has to do with monkeys climbing a ladder or some crap, and that never happened. But the one involving the U.S. military, as far as I know, they had these certain types of primates where they were isolated on many different islands, not living in little community groups, but isolated from group to group. So the same breed of orangutan or whatever in the heck it was, you might have a few dozen of them on one island that are isolated from, by miles and maybe some seas, to another group of a few dozen on another island, and you may have, I don't know, a dozen or so islands. I don't know the exact numbers. And, honestly, I did try to verify that this happened, and I found some documentation of it that seemed to appear that it did, but who the hell knows anymore? But anyway, so what the gist of it is, the military taught one of these isolated groups of primates how to wash and peel these potatoes that were either indigenous to the area, or maybe the army dumped them off there. God, I'm terrible at this. I should have studied this a little more, but I'm just winging it here, guys. But they taught one group how to clean and peel these potatoes so that they could eat them. And sort of spontaneously, once they taught one group, obviously the group learned from one another, but you've got a few dozen of these animules that are peeling and just loving digging on these, grinding on these taters. And just sort of spontaneously, these other groups that were isolated from the original group spontaneously just sort of picked up on it and learned how to do the same process where, cleaning and peeling these potatoes so that whatever the hell they were doing to eat them. But I think that's interesting, not to liken people to monkeys. And no, I don't think that this proves evolution, but when you've got sentient, intelligent beings, I personally don't see humans, I don't see people as all that much different from some other sentient, intelligent beings, honestly. And that's not anything Darwinian. Again, I don't subscribe to evolution, but the similarities are certainly there between us and, chimpanzees, between us and dogs, between us and dolphins, between us and lizards and snakes and everything else. I mean, there are some similarities. Carbon-based life forms, most of us have two eyes, so there's some similarities. We survive by eating and procreating. That's how the species survives. So, you've got that. But so at the end of the day, I just, I don't know. For many, many years, long time, I have often felt that people and humans are similar in many, many ways to, what you would call animals, right? That's just an observation. And of course, there's plenty that sets us apart. There's not a whole lot of animals that use laser beams and make movies starring, I don't know, people like Caitlyn Jenner. You don't see animals doing that. You don't see animals using spherical trigonometry to figure out the shape of the world. So, humans definitely have things that set us apart from the animal kingdom, but in many ways we are similar. And so at the end of the day, I guess what I'm saying is, if it's possible for these orangutans or chimps or whatever they used on these islands for the 100 monkey experiment phenomenon, I don't see why such a thing wouldn't apply or couldn't apply to people. And so, this goes back to something that I talked about earlier this week or last week on, I think it was with the Sun and Moon group, about I was on there with Russian Vids was the main guest. And that man, I think he was on that Hangout for like 8 hours straight. I mean, he is a soldier, buddy. But for any of you guys that aren't familiar with Russian Vids, he's put out a lot of good stuff over the years, and he started doing flat Earth stuff. He's got a big successful channel. Started doing flat Earth stuff within the last year or two, and just very recently with the giant major purge on YouTube, his was one of the channels that got axed. So anyway, that's a huge shame to see that sort of censorship. It really, really does. It is sort of scary. But so anyway, I did a hangout on Sun and Moon group the other day with Russian vids, or I sort of got on at the tail end, the last hour or two. But so the conversation that came up was Russian vids does a lot of numerology stuff. Like, you know, he looks for 33s and stuff in the different types of gematria and all sorts of news stories and logos. And, you know, it seems like he's could be onto something, because you find these numbers everywhere, and the people who are in power and you know, who are in charge of things are very much into numerology and gematria and that sort of thing. But so, you know, what my point is that if you have large groups of people who are intent on a thing, whatever that thing may be, and focus that intent collectively, and you could call this faith. If you're focusing intent with faith, I think that actually there is something to that. I've seen just way too much manifest in the real world because of faith. But then you could also probably go another direction with it and call it magic or sigil magic, when maybe you're doing more insidious things or things to strictly benefit you or your group. When you have large groups of people focusing their attention on some intent or some goal, and you're also applying human psychology to this on large scales, which they do, you know, perhaps there is something to this. Perhaps you can manifest real change in the real world just strictly by you know, focusing massive amounts of people's intent on any given thing. And I suppose this could go in a very positive way, or it could go in a sort of negative direction. But typically, when you're talking about sigil magic, and of course, like the United States money is nothing less than sigil magic. I mean, you've got sigils all over it, spells. You know, money is a spell. People, I hate to say it, but people worship money. It's very powerful indeed. Yet it is, at the end of the day, just worthless paper with, you know, pretty interesting artwork printed on them. But physically, there really is no difference between a $100 bill and a dollar bill and a monopoly money bill. But the difference between U.S. federal debt notes is the fact that the non-federal Federal Reserve Bank that doesn't hold reserves, so its name is literally a double lie. It's not federal, it's not part of the government, nor do they hold any reserves, yet it's called the Federal Reserve Bank because it sounds very official now, doesn't it? Right? So the only difference between their money and monopoly money is the American people agreed long before most of us were even born, back during the what was it, 1912? I want to say 1913, something like that, on Jekyll Island in Georgia over Christmas holiday. All of the sneaky Congress people, along with the Rothschilds, surely secret society members, got together in secret and signed the Federal Reserve Act, while most of Congress was, you know, decorating the Christmas tree and wrapping presents on Christmas vacation. These guys wrote the Federal Reserve Act, and essentially what that did was took away the Congress's sovereign ability to print, issue, and set the value of currency, privatized our money, so that we've got people who are able to literally print money out of thin air, then loan it to our government at interest, use our future tax dollars as well as our children's future tax dollars and the grandkids and their kids, all the future tax dollars, well, forever, is going to go to the Federal Reserve in order to repay all of this debt. Now, here's the thing, though. They never had the money to begin with. So basically, our great great grandkids are on the hook for just millions and millions of dollars. I mean, these poor SOBs are going to be digging themselves out of a hole that is so freaking deep. I just don't even see it going on that long. I mean, something must give, right? But so this federal bank, they can, let's just say hypothetically, it's a room. Hang on, I've got a text message in. Let me make sure it's something important. Oh, yeah. Oh, we're gonna throw in a wrench. We got some trolls in the chat. Okay, so let me hold this thought. Thanks, Bob. Yeah, I wasn't paying attention to the chat at all. So let me pass out some wrenches. There you go, Bob. I got you a wrench. And I know we've got a lot of good people in the chat. I don't know if Bob can put, or I don't know if Bob has the ability to put other people wrenches, but if you do, Bob, that would be great. I don't want to overwork you there in the chat, but I do appreciate you letting me know. So where was I? Oh, yes, the Federal Reserve. Hang on one second. I have to take a little bit of my medicine. Yeah, it's just pot. Don't worry about it, guys. Okay, so yeah, the Federal Reserve is well, really what it is, it's the #1 domestic enemy that America has ever had. And in fact, one of the reasons that America was founded in such the way that it was, and we're talking prior to the Constitution, because in my humble opinion, the Freemasonic Constitution is not all that it's cracked up to be. The United States was a republic long before it was ever intended to be a sort of federation or a federal centralized power entity. But so essentially something like the Federal Reserve, where you've got a small group of private, very, very wealthy people, you could call them royalty or something, but very, very small group of people that have the ability to control the wealth of entire, nations. That's something that was never intended, in the foundation of the Republic of America. And yet, again, the Federal Reserve Act in 1912 or 1913 put an end to that. And it was implemented, it's not something that changed things overnight, but allegedly their mission was to avoid inflation. So to make sure that the value of the dollar remained steady after some after some problems with very minor depressions. And of course, we then got the Great Depression. And while since the Federal Reserve Act was passed, the dollar has lost, well, essentially all of its value. So what a dollar was in, say, 1900, it's worth less than a nickel of that now. So, to say that the Federal Reserve was an utter failure in its mission to, prevent inflation and to keep the dollar stable, I mean, they are at least an utter, utter, utter failure. Absolute utter failure. And that's at best. Now, at worst, this is all intentional, and in my humble opinion, they're the #1 domestic enemy America's ever seen. Because again, if this entity, the Federal Reserve, it's not federal, it holds no reserves. It's basically a conglomerate of super banks, super large banks, obviously, because the price of the shares and all this crap. But it's large banks that are anonymous. So we don't know who owns the Federal Reserve. That is a trade secret. So quite frankly, I would not be surprised if China owned majority stocks in the Federal Reserve, or maybe something even more bizarre like the Vatican. That would not surprise me, but something like that. And it doesn't matter. The point is that these mystery people that we have no idea who they are, and you've got people that, like chair and head the Federal Reserve that are their sort of PR face. But in terms of who owns the shares of the Federal Reserve Bank, that is a mystery. Nobody knows. But you can pretty much narrow it down, again, because of the amount of money that would be needed, that you would have. So it's big banks that own it. And this is a for-profit corporation. It's totally unconstitutional. Yet this is what we grow up in. So how did I get way off on this tangent of the Federal Reserve? Um, you know, maybe this is sort of besides the original point, but it goes to show you the level of just utter deception that people, even adults, rational, very smart, well-educated, good-hearted people, the level to which we can be deceived about things that affect us so heavily. And when you tell a lot of people about this, like, well, what does it matter? What does it matter if the Federal Reserve is not federal, nor does it hold any reserves? What does it matter if they're unconstitutional? Well, you know, let's put it this way. Let's say there's 50 of us stranded on an island. I don't know. It's probably not a good analogy, but let's just say there's some commerce on this island. You can buy and sell things, and there's maybe some form of currency. But say one person out of all these people doesn't have diddly squat, doesn't have anything, decides that they are going to loan you out enough currency to buy what you need. Even though they don't have it, they're able to somehow draw up a contract that says you have this amount and I owe you, or some piece of paper that says you can go and purchase X amount of chickens with this amount of currency, and they hand that over to you. You spend it, although you have to pay them back with interest. Okay, so not only did the money that they loaned you never exist, they never had it, they just loaned you money in theory. Now you have to pay them back real money that does exist, that you worked for, plus interest that never existed to begin with either. The interest never existed to begin with either. So you're having to create money that doesn't exist. Now, this is the one part of how the US dollar gets so inflated. It's because you can't just go inventing money that doesn't exist, yet that's exactly what the Fed does when they loan the US government money. Now, at the branch levels, the member FDIC branch levels, man, you've got they're doing what's called fractional reserve banking, to where for every dollar that they have on deposit, they're able to loan out something like at least 10 times that amount. Okay, so if I put $1,000 in the bank, they can now loan out more or less $10,000 to somebody else, or a $10,000 to one other person, or $1,000 to 10 people. But they can loan out 10 times more at least than what they have on deposit. So essentially, members FDIC, credit union banks, that are giving out lines of credit to people for things like houses and cars, they are also creating money that doesn't exist out of thin air, and making people pay that back with interest. So basically, they put a number in a computer and loan you $250,000 to buy a house. They type it up in a computer, and now wham bam, thank you ma'am, you've got the money in your account. It's a number in your account, or it's a number, you have to pay it off for the 30 years or whatever. But when you sign for that loan, well, then your signature was what created that 250,000, that $250,000 in wealth that did not exist until you signed it into existence. However, you're now on the hook for that $250,000. It never existed. So you're going to work very hard for many years to pay that money back to the bank that they never had to begin with, by the way, plus interest, I might add. And this further inflates the dollar. It's by design. Any economist or any politician that tells you any other reason of why the dollar is in, well, basically collapse because it's worthless for all extents and purposes, but also why America is in decline and in such huge debt. And they'll do things like cut budgets and watch spending and have government shutdowns, but they will never, ever, ever in a million years address the actual problem, which, again, I've already said it a couple times. It's the Federal Reserve, and it's the fractional reserve members FDIC banks. Just creating wealth out of thin air, charging interest. I mean, how do you think these guys are able to pay their CEOs millions and millions and millions of dollars? What? Because they're good with money? Good, all those fees that they charge you if you bounce a check, or if you don't have enough money, they charge you fees. And if you got a bunch of money in the bank, you get free money. So no, they're not. They're not. Getting millions and billions of dollars a year in profits. These banks, because they're very savvy at business. It's a big fat scam. If I had the ability to where, if you loan me $10, now I have the ability to loan out $100 out to different various people, plus interest. I would become rich very, very quickly. Right? Because you can't just say make money up out of thin air, but these guys do. And so most people, let's just talk about Americans. Most Americans, most people are gonna. I'm already way up past my bedtime. I got to get up early myself, but I got to go be a slave for the dollar. But most Americans will get up every day, go to work, and basically do a job that in most cases you hate them, and sure, we make the best of it, but there's a lot of jobs out there that really, really suck. you know like I went to college for music. I went to Shenandoah University on a guitar scholarship, majored in guitar, minored in piano, and took all the other regular classes too. I had to take science, and I had to take writing and ethics and all the fun stuff. But like tomorrow, I'm getting up and going to work on a construction site, doing hard work that I would never ever ever do unless I needed the money. And so I am essentially a slave to this debt system as well. I'll be the first to admit it. I was practically homeless not that long ago. Just a few months ago, I was living out of a hotel, and yeah, I actually slept on the street for about a week before I was able to get into the hotel. This was not that long ago. So if you don't conform to this really just absolutely crazy system that rewards all the wrong things. And anyway, I'm sort of getting off track here, but the point that I was trying to make, and I'm trying to find me a cigarette to light, but the point that I was trying to make is the level of deception that people will live under and love it. Because honestly, most people, and we're all guilty of it. You sort of have to be. Money has to be really important in your life. That's the way our society's set up. Now, to what degree? That varies. Some people, there's a lot of people, many, 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 many people out there. I would say the majority of people love money and rely on money, but just have that on their attached, sort of like a monkey on their back, leeching on their very soul, is the cash. And again, it's one of these examples where people love the deception and defend themselves from the truth, just like the globe and the flat earth. Money is another one of these examples where we are literally slaves to worthless pieces of paper. And I think it's something like 80% of money isn't even printed. It's just hypothetical numbers in a computer system somewhere in the cloud. But we are all slaves to this. And the reason that we're slaves to this is because if you look at and I could probably pull up a chart, but you can look at it. If you look at the rate at which, say, minimum wage has increased over the decades, and then the rate of increase of the cost of things, like the cost of living, the cost of real things, it's just a huge discrepancy there. I mean, the cost of things has gone up exponentially over the last, say, 30 or 40 years. Although the minimum wage is more or less stagnant, it's only gone up a few dollars over the last like 20 years. It's gone up a couple of bucks, right? And I don't want to get into the whole debate about, why minimum wage is a good thing or a bad thing. But the point is that people will, like, for example, I work with a lot of contractors who subcontract out their sort of crappy jobs, the stuff that nobody wants to do, to temp agencies, daily work, daily pay, sort of temp agencies. And, a lot of these are multi-million-dollar contracts. And the hardest work is done by people who are making sometimes minimum wage. So, very, very low pay for very difficult work. And you just see this inequality right in your face where, and of course, there's hard work and good work ethic gets you a lot of places, I believe. But when you see it all the time, to where you've got certain breeds of people who really don't do anything at all ever, like they show up to work and don't do anything, like it's crazy, and just make massive, massive, massive amounts of money, and watch other people essentially, do backbreaking work for just pennies on the dollar. And I just don't see how people could live with themselves like that. I couldn't. I just couldn't put myself in that position, and just really just reaming people, for backbreaking work, essentially slaving. But people will do that. I mean, that's how a lot of people are. A lot of people put money above all else, and that is because, well, of course, you need it to survive. But again, you have this whole sigil magic, I believe, aspect to it, where if you look all over the dollar bill, it's full of all kinds of crazy stuff. But people are very much addicted to this thing called money. When you know when you take this whole cash thing out of the equation, or take a step back and look at this whole thing, you've got worthless pieces of paper that are essentially the most important things in most everyone's life. Okay, and when you tell them about that it's a scam, they say, well, what difference does it make? Right. So the difference that it makes is that basically our economy, our currency has been privatized. So the Federal Reserve is a for-profit corporation that is in charge of issuing our currency out to the government at interest. Looks like I have another.
Just yell out to Chris.
Oh, okay. Yeah, shout out to Chris B if you're out there listening, bud. I got a text, but I wasn't able to read the whole thing just yet, but okay, sorry. So, anywho, what was I just saying? I sort of lost my train of thought there. But you know, people love their deception. I guess that's what I'm saying. Um, Once people are accustomed to something, we're very much creatures of habit. And so, like, for the heliocentric model, once we're accustomed to something, and I was talking to my buddy on the phone the other day, and we were talking about the same thing. Um, I still find myself thinking in terms of heliocentric values and heliocentric theories, but I, most of the time I'm doing that because I'm always still trying to test the paradigm that I had for the majority of my life, and very profoundly, in the way that I saw myself, the world, the universe, everything. um, I still find myself thinking along those terms, primarily to test it against new observations, or just still trying to see if there's any merit to any of this whole globe earth infinite space stuff. And of course, every single time, you come up with results that are strictly not compatible with a spinning ball Earth and fit very nicely, if nothing else, to a flat, motionless Earth. But it is very difficult to sort of shake that programming and to really understand things, or not understand things, but really accept it 100% through and through, that the Earth is flat and space doesn't exist. And I'm definitely at that point. I've been at that point for quite a while. There's no question in my mind about flat Earth, or at least the lack of twirling sphericity of the damn Earth. That certainly isn't there. But again, it is a very powerful delusion. So powerful, in fact, that it still has sort of ripples or repercussions in my thought processes to this day. And I will say that once you sort of escape from the cult of scientism and escape from the cult of globism, flat Earth is a very comfortable place to be indeed. It's very pacifying to know that the Earth is not some little insignificant speck of dust, spinning around and orbiting around in the vast, empty cosmos with no purpose and no goal, no destination. It's very depressing if you think about infinite space. It puts people, what is one single human life compared to infinite space and quadrillions of Earth-like habitable planets out there. Frankly, it puts us in a psychological position where we're totally insignificant. It wouldn't matter if the entire solar system exploded this instant. The universe would be more or less the same either way in infinite space globe Earth theory. But none of that is true, because a lot of what we get from people that we're telling this to for the first time, like I was telling actually somebody today for the first time in person about flat Earth, and just running a couple things by him, and getting a couple questions. Got circumnavigation. That's always one. That's a real easy one to explain. But it was either the second or the third thing is, well, why? Why would they lie? And that one isn't so simple. And quite frankly, it's irrelevant. Why? Because if we can show that the Earth doesn't have curvature and we can show that it's not in motion, then why doesn't even come into the conversation? It's what the that's what comes into the question. But we sort of we can answer that too, but it is such a complicated answer. Um, you know, I think that it's for sure, like atheism and nihilism are a direct result of the heliocentric Big Bang theory, right? So this whole attitude that nothing matters and there is no God, or in terms of nihilism, nothing matters, and in terms of atheism, nothing created everything, so nothing kind of matters. But these sorts of mindsets, and not saying that religious people are good and non-religious people are bad. I'm certainly not religious in the sense of ceremoniously religious, but I consider myself a faithful and spiritual person and follower of Christ. But I think that the churches these days, especially the big, very super rich churches, are antithetical to the teachings of Christ, and antithetical and anemical to spirituality in general. Um, you know, but I don't know. It just seems that with flat Earth, we are way more important. There's a purpose to things. There's not billions of Earth-like planets out there. The physical plane is the only physical plane in existence. There's nothing like unto the Earth anywhere in the cosmos. The lights in the night sky are not an infinitude of sun-like stars and Earth-like planets. But there is no such thing as an Earth-like planet, and frankly, there's probably no such thing as a planet. If the moon is a sphere, and I'm not saying that it is, but if the moon happens to be a sphere, that doesn't mean that the Earth is a sphere by any stretch of the imagination. Um, and the sun is certainly not a million times bigger than the Earth. Um, so what happened was, throughout history, scientists, for some reason, it seems to me, my research has led me to the conclusion where I can fairly well say that at some point in the last couple of 100 years, and maybe forever, like say alchemy, but science was merged or co-opted by dark occultists, spiritualists, dark occultists, spiritualists, Satanists. This is evident with the likes of Jack Parsons setting up Jet Propulsion's laboratory, which was an integral partner with NASA for years and years, still are, I believe. You've got people, I don't know, you can probably name dozens of examples, but you do have this sort of intermingling with at least ideologies that are reminiscent, at least, with these, dark occultists. But you have this sort of egotism. It's almost like a reverse egotism to me, where these people feel very uncomfortable thinking that we are somehow in a special, unique position. For some reason, these scientists and spiritual occultists merged with scientists believe that it is unpreferable for us to be in any sort of central, unique, special position. They would much rather us be tucked away in some forgotten corner of a average galaxy in a older part of the universe, the infinite universe. That they would much rather have our entire lives or the entire human history be as insignificant as a single grain of sand on all the beaches in the world. For some reason, that makes them feel comfortable. And, this is evident all throughout, since the Copernican revolution, where there's this sort of dogma in scientism that there must not be any sort of intelligent design behind the universe. There must not be any centrality or speciality of the earth. We must be insignificant. We must be, below average. And, this is one of the biggest why would they lies that I can think of. And it sounds maybe subtle or it sounds maybe trite, but I disagree. I think it is such a profound, massive mind control manipulation device. This whole heliocentric theory, Copernican principle, even Einsteinian gravitic theory, all of this stuff to me is extremely insidious. It preys on our ID, or it preys on our self-esteem, and it preys on our empathy for one another and the future of the world at such a very profound subconscious level. And most of us are not, just simply not self-analytical or honest with ourselves enough to admit it. But yeah, I mean, when people ask me why, it's hard to answer that question. Not because there aren't answers, it's just a very long answer. I mean, it's a difficult question to verbally, get these ideas in front of people as to why would they lie about this. Now, of course, you've got NASA, who's raking in 20 million bucks a day to pretend to be in space and to pretend to, launch off multi-million dollar firecrackers, bottle rockets that certainly get launched up into the air And as they go level off, and then the nose of the rocket goes down towards the ocean, they're not going into orbit. Um, we this last Sunday on Globebusters, we had, Ira Linducci had played some really interesting clips of high altitude vantage points of some rocket launches, and it's just very plainly obvious that these guys aren't even trying to get to any sort of orbital velocity or trajectory. They're just launching rockets out into the sea. Um, so you have these guys, NASA and all the international space agencies and SpaceX, who are apparently at this point responsible for perpetuating the lie for some reason. Now, why would they do it? Why would the astronauts do it? Why would NASA do it? Well, NASA is clearly a secret society, Freemasonic, occult organization. They name all of their missions after pagan gods, and like Osiris Rex and Gemini. I mean, it's just all of them, pretty much. These guys are part of these secret societies who are running the show. They've got a pretty damn thing good going, because damn good thing going, because there's a lot of psychopaths out there. And psychopaths tend to try to position themselves in positions of power and influence and sway over others. Um, you know, Psychopathic people want to be in control, right? They're psychopaths. And so when you introduce people with psychopathic tendencies into these secret societies like Freemasonry, and I'm not saying that all Freemasons are evil. Most Freemasons, I would imagine, are good people, hard workers that never make it past the Blue Lodge, never make it past that third Master Mason degree, and don't know really anything about the true purpose of the lodge. They think they've got some silly secrets, but it does help them to get contracts, and things like that. I will promise you that. But so they're not all evil for sure, but when you put psychopathic people into these situations, especially when you've got these sort of blue blood Ivy League families that are involved heavily with these secret societies, like the Bushes with Skull and Bones, and Clinton with the Rhodes, and on and on and on. You insert psychopaths into these secret societies and into positions of power, they are going to abuse that, and they're going to have really no conscience. Now, at some point, in terms of NASA, at some point, it was decided that the globe Earth lie was going to be perpetuated. They're going to stick with it, even though they must have figured out at some point that it's flat and stationary. They had to have, no way around it. Okay. And so at some point, they decided they were going to keep lying about it. And so here's another reason as to why. Why do they lie about this? We already said it, we already gave a couple of examples, but well, they'd have to rewrite pretty much all the science textbooks. They'd have to rewrite the accepted stance on the way people look at the Bible. Not to bring up biblical arguments about flat Earth, but there's a lot of secularists who have said, well, if God's all knowing and the Bible's the word of God, then why does he say that the Earth is motionless? And why does he say that the sun goes around, in circuits and that sort of thing? And so those arguments have to be rewritten. The science textbooks have to be rewritten. Everybody has to admit that they were wrong. NASA has to admit that they've been faking space for 50 years or whatever. Same thing goes for all the other space agencies. They'd have to admit to the people that they have been bold-faced lying to our faces and stealing our money while telling us that they're exploring space. So, that sort of thing is never, ever going to happen. Now, I don't know if y'all caught this in the news. My cigarette keeps going out. Sorry, y'all. I don't know if y'all saw this in the news recently, but I I guess Donald Trump is going to be cutting the funding for the ISS by, I want to say 2025. So they're doing away with the ISS. And they said that was because of Bob and Jaron and I. No, I'm kidding. No, they want to spend more money on sending people to Mars by 2025. Right. But so, yeah, it's so funny. They're going to send people to Mars. No, they're not. It's never going to happen. Oh, my goodness. But, you've got this whole question as to why, what's the motive for the lie? Why would they keep lying about it? Well, and again, at some point, they must have figured it out and decided that it would behoove them to continue the lie. Now, one point that I've always thought was valid is the Antarctic Treaty. So assuming that assuming an AE sort of projection, we don't have to go with any model. It's not necessary. The Earth doesn't have curvature. It's not in motion. Therefore, it isn't a spinning sphere, and we don't need a model. But we'll just humor like an AE circular projection layout, which makes a lot of sense to me. Really does. There's some problems with it, but they're not deal breakers for the flat Earth, as some would have you believe. Um, Supposing there's way more land out there than what we've been told. The world boundaries that we know of on the globe are merely hypothetical boundaries which only exist in our mind. And so supposing that the flat Earth has much, much, much more land. Who knows? Anywhere from a little bit more land to infinitely more land, and anywhere in between. That's how much more land could possibly be out there that we don't know of. And if the people of the world figured this out, would they stay here? And I think the answer to that is a resounding hell to no. Hell to the no, we ain't staying here. And, for good reason. I love America. I grew up here. I'm not anti-American, but this country's going to hell in a handbasket. The gap between the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer is just increasing by the day. I think it's something like 5 billionaires have more wealth and assets than half of Americans, or something like that. It's more than like 150 million people. So 5 billionaires have more assets and cash and money and real estate and wealth than the bottom half of all Americans. Um, yeah. So, but anyway, if people found out that there was way more land out there and we could go homestead and we could get away from these tyrannical governments, much like the original settlers to to America did, getting away from usury, taxes without representation, getting away from just a dominant church state. Right, so you had the Holy Roman Empire and the kings and queens and feudal lords and all this stuff. People were fed up with that crap. Just the crazy stuff that went on. And hang on, what now? Okay, you keep making me lose my train of thought. Sorry, guys. Okay, so no, okay, so much the same stuff that the people that originally settled and came to America were getting away from, all this crazy nonsense coming from, the Holy Roman Empire and kings and feudal lords. We would do it again. I would, if we were able to, if there was more land out there somewhere, maybe south of Antarctica, like was outlined in the Iron Republic. I've got that on audiobook on my main channel, TheMorgile. If you haven't read it, you can listen to it that way if you're interested. But it's really cool because it details. It's written as if it's a true story. I'm not going to swear that it's true, but it does ring true to me at least. And it's it's nice to believe it. But in that book, there's a civilization, sort of a breakaway civilization from, from they were coming to colonize the Americas, and broke away and found a continent that is south of Antarctica. And for a few hundred years, they had been developing their own technologies and developing their own culture and civilization outside of what was going on in America, right? But so if we had the ability now to do that, the world governments would lose control. They would absolutely lose control because everything's on a grid now. You know, uh, there are places in America that are very wide open. I don't think we have as much of an overcrowding problem as people would like to believe, but at the same time, we're under the control grid of the American government. I mean, period. Um, and they like that. They like keeping tabs on people. We've got just an outrageously bloated prison criminal justice system, nanny state for a free country where we have millions and millions of prisoners. And, people that live here have to pay taxes on, well, everything that we buy, everything that we earn, even when we die. I mean, there's a tax for pretty much everything. And for some reason, they have to tax us because they have to pay back those loans to the Federal Reserve Bank. But so the point is, though, is that if this cat were to get out of the bag, that the Earth is flat and we're not on a sphere in space, and our nearest neighbor isn't Mars or whatever. Our nearest neighbor could be, just a few thousand miles away for all we know. It may not be all that far. If there are other, so maybe worlds, using the term loosely, if there are other worlds along the plane somewhere, they hypothetically may not be that far away. And so, the minute that the world at large figures out what's going on out there, then the governments of the world lose their control. And so when you look at things like I mentioned earlier, the Antarctic Treaty, well, after Admiral Byrd went down to Antarctica a few times and found some pretty interesting stuff. Just at face value, you're talking fuel sources, coal, probably oil, gold, platinum, titanium. Antarctica is just a massive, massive untapped continent. It's a huge resource for natural resources. And you would think that in the last 50 years or so, that there would be corporate activity just all over the place in the Antarctic. There's no indigenous life forms there. There's no native people that live there. You're not going to bother anybody, even if you spill a gazillion gallons or barrels of oil. And it would be the perfect place for them to set up shop. Yet we saw the opposite of that. We saw Antarctica essentially be shut off to corporate activity, absolutely, as well as supposedly shut off to military activity, and only allowed open for scientific purposes, right? But there's not a whole lot of science that can be done down there, because once you get down to your little outpost in Antarctica, you can't travel around. You're basically stuck in one little spot, and you can't do much more than sit there and observe the stars and observe sub-zero temperatures, right? And so if there are possibly other civilizations that are out there beyond what we may think of as Antarctica, or maybe not in that direction at all. We don't know what the exact map is. We just know that the Earth is definitely not a spinning ball. But the governments would lose control. They would lose taxes, and it would just be a situation where they're no longer relevant because for some reason they just want us as slaves to this debt system, And most people are content with that. And again, as I mentioned in the beginning, most people will defend themselves from the truth and defend themselves from what is right, because we have been conditioned and raised in a society to feel comfortable with our proverbial chains and shackles and, weighty balls attached to the chains. And when that sort of thing becomes comfortable and people attack those who try to free them from those chains, um, we still have to try. We still have to try, because if we don't, then it's almost like we're guilty by, well, not guilt by association, but just guilt by complacency. And so, I think that's really the main reason why flat earthers are so passionate about getting the truth out there, in spite of the personal repercussions, in spite of the name calling and the ad hominem attacks. It really is one of those big, major, huge, important things that people really need to look at. And so, this is why I can't stand when people ask me, well, why would they lie? Because there's so many legitimate answers, but you really have to sort of go down a rabbit hole to explain them properly. Um, but there's lots of reasons why, lots of reasons. Mainly because I think that this is what I think. This is what I've settled on. But this is just one of many possible answers. My research has shown that people who are going to be mind controlled or hypnotized or influenced to do something they don't want to do, even going into like the sort of darker sides of this, like MK Ultra and the stuff that the CIA and the U.S. military and secret agencies did to many times unwitting participants in studies. But anytime the subject is confounded about their any belief system, any core belief system that is at odds or at conflict, or they're confounded in that belief, puts a person in a state of mind that is conducive to mind control or predictive programming, or essentially programming them to react in a certain way if a situation arises. So if you have a person that is confounded in their fundamental beliefs of a thing, and that thing is important to them in everyday life, then that puts them in a position that's more conducive to be influenced or quote unquote mind controlled. And so if the world itself is clearly obviously stationary, it's clearly obviously a plane, it doesn't have curvature, it's clearly not in any sort of orbital or axial rotational motion, and that is obvious to all of our senses. I mean, if you test this with just your senses, you must agree that it sure as hell doesn't feel like we're racing 1,000 miles an hour to the east near the equator, vertically dropping along that curve at something like 130 miles an hour squared, relative to a tangent line from any given base point. Never in a million years has anyone ever felt even the alleged rotational velocity of the Earth, let alone the super duper hypersonic alleged orbital velocity, where we're supposedly standing on the nose of a bullet that's going 67,000 miles an hour up towards our feet in the morning. And then 12 hours later, we're riding on the tail of a bullet that's going 67,000 miles an hour, dropping away from our feet. A total acceleration of over 130 some odd thousand miles an hour over a 12-hour period. Never felt any of that acceleration or motion, not even mentioning the solar orbital velocities or the galactic orbital velocities. No human being or even any um, measuring device has ever measured or sensed this motion. And so when we're told and we're forced to believe that this motion exists and must exist and obviously exists. Yeah, oh yes, obviously we live stuck to the side of a spinning sphere, and anyone who says they can't feel it doesn't understand how physics works, which is just, I mean, it is just absurd, but that's the position. And so we're in that mindset. We are physically at odds with our good senses and what we believe. We're confounded in the very core of our belief system. And I'll give you another example. It's my belief that the King James version of the Bible is a perversion and a twisting of the teachings and the morals and the legacy of Christ. Christ was very much not into, I wouldn't say religion, but he was very much against wolves in sheep's clothing, and he called the Pharisees like whitewashed tombs on the outside, full of dead men's bones and such. And so it is my belief that the King James Bible is just a huge perversion of the actual message and legacy of Christ. And so when you have Christians, many Christians who are very attached to the King James Bible with all of its contradictions, I think that's another good place for people to be mind controlled. And I don't mean this to sound anti-Christian at all, but I'm more anti-established religion, or anti-King James at least, right? Because what the hell does King James know? So there's another answer to that question as to why. Why would they lie about the globe? Why, what a silly thing to lie about. But if you've got these social engineer think tanks who are running crap, they're thinking of ways to make people more easily malleable or more easily mind controlled. So that's where you get things like fluoride in the water. It's a developmental neurotoxin, makes people more docile, more suggestible. When you start adding these things all up, poor diet, I got to thinking about it for the last couple of days. Has been kind of busy and kind of kind of broke days, but luckily I'm back to work again this week. But the food that I've been eating has just been very, very high in carbs and high in sugar. And there's been some medical studies shown where if you feed livestock sugar water, it's a lot cheaper than feeding them, corn and grain. And they'll get fat pretty quick, but they also get sick and die, right? And so, I mean, when you're hitting us with physically with food that is not even half the time worth being called food, GMOs and growth hormones and antibiotics, in all of it, that's one thing. Then they're hitting us in the water with the fluoride. That's another. Then they hit us psychologically with things like money and things like the globe, and all these stresses and conflicting dogmas. It puts the average American, and let's not forget all the bills piled on top of everything. I mean, there's lots of stressors in this world, that's for sure. And the minimum wage ain't going up. But all of these things piled on the heads of people is just immensely stressful. It's not the way we were intended to live. I mean, we were sort of built to live in harmony with the world. The world and God, you could say, provides everything that we need. Although humankind has taken many of the reins of power and many of the sovereignties, many of the rights, God-given, unalienable, irrevocable rights that we have, and turned them into privileges, and put us on this leash of debt in the form of fiat currency that is worthless paper, and made made those spells, that sigil magic, some of the most, or one of the most important things in the world. Money makes the world go around, but you just add all of this stuff together, and you could go on, but I don't want to sit here and bum anybody out. But this stuff takes a toll on a person, and if you give them bread and beer and circus, like the Romans say, give them bread and beer and circus, then none of that stuff really matters. Keep them entertained. Keep them entertained, right? Because Rome knew you can't rule even your own people by force. The elites and the ruling classes are outnumbered many thousands to one. And so they would much rather inject our lives with stresses and drive wedges between us and our, brothers and sister human beings. And these wedges come in many forms. I don't know, pro-life or pro-dead baby. No, I'm kidding. Pro-life or pro-choice. I don't know, Republican, Democrat, Pepsi and Coke. There's so many wedges that are divided between us when most people are pretty much the same in many regards. But when you add up all these stresses and all these wedges, and we're talking physical stuff, we're talking sociological stuff, psychological stuff, all sorts of things that are manipulated through, a lot of it's through the mass media, whether that's newspaper, internet, radio, television, big budget movies. What people are being manipulated through these avenues. And it just seems that the fact that most people believe they live stuck to the side of a spinning sphere in outer space, even though they've always lived on a stationary plane, on the physical plane, on the ground, in reality, that's never moved a single inch, doesn't have any curvature, obviously. We've all always lived there. The fact that we are just so absolutely deceived and confounded in what we believe the world to be, it appears would put people in some form of a position to be easily manipulated, right? And you could go into lots of things about the world, global warming, asteroids, all of these hypotheticals in space, these space age problems. Um, it really is a lot of fear porn, but people react to that. So maybe I've done a pretty good job of answering why they would lie. And these are just a few things. I could probably pull out some more, but that always comes up. It came up today when I was talking flat Earth to somebody that really had never heard of it at all, maybe a little bit, and didn't know anything about it. But that's one of the first things that comes up is why. Why would they lie? And I think the final answer to that is 99% of them are not lying. So, like, our teachers weren't lying, our parents weren't lying. Yeah, they were lying about Santa Claus. Yeah, they were. But no, they weren't lying about the globe. Um, it was something that they were taught when they were very young, and they teach it to others because they think it's true. And so this is a self-perpetuating lie. And again, people have been raised with this lie as their understanding of the world for many, many, many generations. And so it's part of our being in many ways. It's part of who we are. Again, we form our outlook on ourselves and on life and on the world and the universe at large based on what we form, or the way that we form between the ages of 2 and 10. When you're younger, that's your formative years, especially between like 2 and 5, but a little bit more intellectually between like 5 and 10. um, when you get children that young with these ideologies, these absolutely ridiculous ideologies and dogmas that are presented as scientific facts, but are nothing more than as just theory on top of theory on top of theory, um, it just becomes very, very difficult for people to escape from that, mindset, to escape from that programming. Although, as I mentioned earlier, it seems like the tides are a turning a little bit, which is very encouraging, because the best thing about the truth is, well, you can't debunk the truth, as much as the globe Earth proponents love to debunk flat Earth, I love doing response videos to those because, frankly, you don't even have to watch the video to know that you're going to win the argument, because you can't debunk the truth. So it is a great position to be in, but the unfortunate part of it is the truth has become so just over the top and absurd according to the mainstream accepted version of things. But as absurd as it may seem at first, I think the hardest part of this whole thing has been to just simply get people to look at this objectively. And it seems like that has gotten a little bit easier. People are just seeming to get it a little bit easier. We don't necessarily have to go through a million questions with every single person. And again, maybe that's because of the wealth of information that's out there. There are a lot more people who can talk, pretty good turkey when it comes to flat Earth stuff as well as globe Earth stuff. And of course, flat earthers know way more about the globe Earth theory than globe Earth proponents do in most cases, but that's sort of been a constant thing throughout. Um, I was gonna try to do something on this live stream real quick with some responses, like a video response to this to these videos that I found, but I don't think you guys are going to be able to hear it. But I can at least make the point and then maybe check the sound and see if you guys can hear it. So let me go to YouTube. This is what I found that really kind of makes me mad. Oh, look, I'm hanging out live. What do you know? Okay. So if you YouTube search flat earth proof, what you're going to get, top result, 3 days ago, 484,000 views. I didn't even know this was going to be on here. This just so happened. This proves my point so nicely. Oh, and let me make sure. Let's see, where are you guys at? Over here. Okay, hey, I'm gonna play something for a second, and if you guys in the chat could tell me if you can hear the audio coming out of this. I don't think you will be able to, so I may have to do this as a video. But I'm gonna play this for uno momento. And if y'all in the chat can let me know if you can hear the video back there, I'll let them start talking. Are they going to talk? I don't know. But let me check. Let me click over to the chat and see. Oh, well, you know what? It might help if I would share my screen, huh? Let me share my screen with you guys. Screen share. But I don't think that the audio is going to play, though. All right, let's try this again. So let me play this. Let me know, you guys, if you can hear the video again. And this is just too funny, because I did this the other day and I did not get this result as the top result. Wow, that is just amazing. All right, so let me go back to the live hangout here and see if you guys can hear me. No audio. Okay, thanks, Bob. I did not think so. I got to get that. What is that BFS thing that you and Jaron use? It seems pretty sweet. But okay. So the point that I was going to try and make here, if I'm still sharing, I think I am, right? Yeah. Okay. So just YouTube searching flat Earth proof, and you get, well, this Mad Mike Hughes rocket launch on CBS. And, don't you just love the synopsis right here, or the summation? A man launches himself in a self-made rocket 1,875 feet above the desert to try and prove his theory that the Earth is flat. Yeah. So you guys probably already know my feelings on this whole Mad Mike thing. To me, it was just a big farce. Not dogging anybody that likes Mad Mike, and I'm not, being disrespectful to anyone that contributed to his GoFundMe, but the whole thing was just very fishy to me. Allegedly, this guy Mad Mike had been a flat earther for a long time. Then he saw this billboard that went up that said "Research Flat Earth," and he apparently got the idea to reach out to the flat Earth community for money to launch his rocket. Now, I would say that to try and prove the Earth is flat by launching a rocket on maybe 2,000 feet is ridiculous, because weather balloons go, dozens and dozens and dozens of thousands of feet into the air, super duper high up. And this, homemade steam rocket is, to me, it was just a silly stunt. But that's the top result from 3 days ago. When you YouTube search "flat Earth proof," you get this. Then the number two thing is from 3 months ago, 60,000 views, new 100% proof that the Earth is flat, NASA exposed. That is a first. I haven't heard of cast trending. So maybe that's a good one, but I find that these are usually reposts. Like, it'll be someone else's video that came out a year ago, and it'll be like a repost, and it's got 20 times more views than the original content creator. Yeah, I've seen this guy before. I've seen this video 2 years ago, I think. Wow. So okay, so there's your second flat Earth proof search result on YouTube. Ooh, man flies rocket to prove the Earth is flat. There's another one of those Mike Hughes ones. Mike Hughes. Oh, and then this guy here. Oh my goodness, proving the Earth is flat. 12 million views from Nigahiga from 11 months ago. 12 million views, and this is the most ridiculous parody. Just awful, poor taste, just absurd video. It's not even about flat Earth. It is absurd, and this is what YouTube is pushing. This is the type of thing that YouTube is pushing. And then there goes this guy. I love, allegedly known as Dave Moore, great guy. This thing over here, not so much. Wow. So the top dozen results on YouTube for flat Earth proof is this Mad Mike shenanigans. He's just all over it, and that is just absolute nonsense. That he's done nothing to prove the Earth is flat or whatever. So so far the only two things I've seen is this cast trending that is pro flat Earth so far, really. And the first one was a repost of something that came out at least a year ago that I know of. All this is all about that silly rocket launch. Wow. And honestly, I'm looking through, I did this the other day, page after page. There's one that's ABC News about the convention. There's Mark. So, that's pretty good. I actually watched that interview. He did a good job on that. But, I haven't seen really any of the channels that I would go to for flat Earth content. Maybe one or two people that I would consider good, experts or subject matter experts on flat Earth. But the vast majority of this are going to be videos claiming to debunk flat Earth. They're going to be videos making flat Earth seem silly. They're going to be videos about Mad Mike. This crazy guy here just makes awful videos that are absolutely like he's parodying flat Earth but presenting it as if he's proving flat Earth, sort of like the Flat Earth Society, but at least he sort of admits that he's parodying it. But just very poorly done, poor taste, not funny. Tries to be funny but not. So, and there's TheMorgile. So okay, he's put out some good stuff. And we got some other guys. So now we're getting, this is a little bit better result than I got the other day. The other day, it was just page after page after page of, anti-flat Earth stuff. But still, maybe I'll watch some of these. I haven't heard of some of these. Go, Feed Your Mind, Fuck It World. Okay. So yeah, maybe they got some good stuff on here now. Oh, you know what it is? I'm logged in as my secondary account. When I'm logged in as TheMorgile, I get different search results. So, okay. So I just did want to bring that up because you guys try it and put in the comments what you get in terms of results. But I had found this one channel the other day when I did this search, and it was this really annoying chick. And I think I was gonna do I was gonna try to do a response to her live tonight, but unfortunately you can't hear me and her at the same time. So I'll do it as a video if I can find her channel. But now, is it this? I wonder if it's this Inside Edition channel. I just got to remember. No. Oh, it's more about Matt. Oh my goodness, it's more about Mike Hughes. Okay, never mind. Wow. Yeah, they took away all the. I wonder if it's this. Yeah, 5 ways you can tell for yourself the Earth is not flat. Popular Science. I don't think that's the one that I was looking for. Anyway, I'll find it and I'll do a video response on it, on the ones that I was talking about, because it's just so funny. Like you get this chick who obviously doesn't know anything about the heliocentric model or the flat Earth model or anything. But yeah, it goes on, goes on the air or goes on YouTube saying how stupid and silly flat Earth is. So it is kind of ironic, but righto. Oh, let me stop sharing my screen real fast, peoples. I was gonna do. Let me see how much time we've got. Wow, it's already after midnight. I may read a little bit to you guys tonight, but I may end up doing that on the next live stream because I've already spent. How long have we been on for? Let me check. Let me check. Oh, 2 hours. Started streaming 2 hours ago. Yeah. So it's after midnight here, and I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning. So I probably stayed up a little bit too late, but I'll hang out just for another minute and wrap this thing up. But I did want to thank all you guys for joining me on short notice. I think what I'll probably do is plan on reading the stuff that I wanted to read to you guys from my book. Maybe on the next stream, or I'm still kind of debating on maybe whether to save that until my primary channel, The Morgile, is back up to where I can post vids and do live streams again. But before I do start wrapping up, let me check in the chat. I see a lot of comments in here, and I was just totally negligent to the redheaded stepchild. Oh, I mean to the chat. So I don't know. I don't see any big, huge questions. Just a lot of good moderating done there, Bob. Thanks a lot, buddy. And the Bloody Truth is here. Hey, the Bloody Truth. So yeah, anyway, well, we went about 2 hours. I guess what I will do is maybe start to wrap this up. Now, I do have a video that I'm working on. I may have it out this week or next, so keep an eye out for that. Obviously, you guys found this show on my secondary channel, so you're watching this live on Jonathan Christopoulos on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe, and then ring the bell, and then accept notifications from this channel. Otherwise, YouTube may involuntarily unsubscribe you from my channel, and nobody wants that. That made me so mad when I got unsubscribed myself from a bunch of channels that I'd been subscribed to for a long, long time, and I still can't remember all of them. So what a shame. Oh, if you guys would like to, I want to thank my patrons real quick on Patreon. Without you guys' help, and you know who you are, none of this would be possible. Coming through Patreon, it's not like lots and lots of money, but it does help. It'll pay a bill, like an internet bill, which I need to post videos, so it is at least self-sustaining, hopefully. You can become a patron through Patreon for as little as $1 a month. It's www.patreon.com/TheMorgile. And you can also support direct through PayPal, which is preferred, although it is not obligatory. to www.paypal.me/TheMorgile. And you can also email me at themorgile@gmail.com. I'll tell you, I had a lot of fun hanging out with you guys tonight. I really do appreciate you all sitting here with me and listening to me. God bless you guys. God bless you all. Love you guys. And as always, spread the word, spread the world, and peace out.